The New York Rangers made a big pre-trade deadline splash, reacquiring JT Miller from the Canucks. We'll talk about his impact and a big win over the Vegas Golden Knights. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's show is sponsored by FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. It is great to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On New York Rangers, John Chick. And John, you could say a lot of things about the Ranger season, but dull is not one of them. A big trade made earlier in the week as JT Miller returns to the Rangers. Your thoughts on the impact that this deal will have both short-term and long-term?
Yeah, it's interesting because, obviously these rumors have been out there for a while. So when the trade actually does happen, the trigger actually does get pulled, it's not like you're super shocked by it, but there is still that kind of moment of like, oh, wow, this actually just happened. Like we're really doing this. JT Miller is really coming back to the Rangers. And, for the most part, I like it. I know there's certain fans that have certain reservations about it, whether it has to do with JT Miller's price tag, whether it has to do with the length of the contract, the full no move clause that he'll have for a couple more seasons here, or, some of the issues that he's had, I guess, on and off the ice, you can say, with, him being a little bit of a volatile player. Sometimes that works in his favor, sometimes it works against him. But overall, I like the move. The bottom line, when this guy is right, and, he's right more often than not, even when there is a whole bunch of drama surrounding him, he's a top 20 player in the NHL. And the Rangers just brought him back here by giving up Filip Chytil, who I think Ranger fans really like. The guy's been through a lot with all the concussions and everything, but he was the Ranger third-line center. You give him up, and you give up a promising defenseman in Victor Mancini, but bottom line, a former fifth-round pick, and the protected first-rounder as well. I think you got to do that trade. I just don't see how, if you're the Rangers, even though there is some risk, even though this could go one of about a million different ways with JT Miller on the Rangers, I don't see how you say no to that deal. And they pounce on it. And we were talking about this just a second ago, so I'll throw this in here now. I also think that this deal is more about next season than it is this season. Sure, they would still love to make the playoffs this year, and they're at least in the mix. They've got a chance at it. But I think that the Rangers are looking to do a retooling of their roster rather than a full-on rebuild. We saw teams like the Caps and the Devils, to look right at the Metro Division. They both did that from last year to this year, and they're obviously in a much better place this year than they were a year ago. And I think the Rangers are thinking they can do the same thing, and JT Miller is kind of the centerpiece of that, bring him in for the next bunch of years here.
Where does JT Miller fit into this lineup, and who do you think benefits the most from his addition?
Yeah, so what they've been doing so far is they've had him on the top line centering Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad. That's interesting in and of itself because Mika is now playing the wing, which is something that, other than like maybe a game or two with the Rangers, I don't think I've ever seen him do that, at least not with any, regularity. The conventional wisdom here was that if the Rangers were going to go with Trocheck, Mika, and Miller all in the top six, that Miller would be the guy maybe to move to a wing because he's done it before. The other two really haven't. But they're trying this, and hey, they got the win today, so we'll give them props for that. Curious to see how it plays out as far as the lineup is concerned going forward. As far as who benefits the most from it, I mean, I would say maybe Artemi Panarin because, he's out there now with obviously a bona fide, superstar player, just like he himself is. And I think those two styles can play well off of each other. Obviously, JT Miller is willing to go in there, do some of the dirty work and all that good stuff. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I think it's more the team as a whole because this roster is just starved for a player like this, a guy that's going to go in there, throw his weight around, play with some edge, play with some intensity. We've already seen a couple different, JT Miller extracurriculars in these first two games with the pushing and the shoving during a play stoppage, whatever it might be. He's somebody that's going to go in there and assert himself right away. And again, I think the Rangers need a player like that. And it all comes back to the price being right. And he's here. And I think the deal was the right thing to do if you're the Rangers.
He had 2 assists in the win over Vegas on Sunday. How important was it to end that 3-game losing streak and beat a very good Vegas Golden Knights team?
Yeah, huge. I mean, I think that, first of all, the first reason why you really like this win is that they did in this game what they did about 1 million times last year and have only done twice this year, and that is they came back and won after being down going into the third period. Last year, you'd be down by a goal watching this Ranger team going into the third, and you would honestly think like, man, we got them right where we want them. We're going to come back. We're going to win this game. Maybe it'll go to overtime. Who knows? But the Rangers will find a way to get it done. That feeling hasn't been there this year because they just haven't done it this year. So it's a huge win for that reason. Awesome to see Jonathan Quick get win number 400. That's obviously a incredibly impressive milestone and what a legendary career. But as far as like bigger picture, the playoff standings, the way things are right now, the Rangers are still within striking distance, as is just about everybody in the Eastern Conference. But if you lose 3 games in a row, which the Rangers just did, or even 2 games in a row, you're going to sink like a stone in the standings because it's just so tight and all the teams around you, everybody's so bunched together. Not all those teams are going to lose. So if you're losing 2 in a row, somebody else is going to win 2 in a row, and this team goes 1-0-1. You get the idea, but you're going to be losing serious ground very quickly if you go through any kind of a losing streak right now. And obviously, every game is absolutely massive for the Rangers, as it is for all the other teams in that Eastern Conference chase there.
You talked about, emulating the Capitals or the Devils with a retool. What do you think that means that happens? What happens between now and the trade deadline?
Between now and the trade deadline, it will be somewhat dictated, I think, by how the Rangers do between now and then, because obviously if they go on another little run here, then maybe they, I would say, are soft buyers, I guess would be the term. Like, I don't see them doing any, they already made their big move. That's JT Miller. I don't think there's going to be another move like that. And even if there was, they might not have the cap space for it. But I think you could see them add on a little bit. If things go south, then I think certainly what will happen is you'll see some of the impending UFAs probably shipped out of town. Riley Smith is here. First season, he's in the last year of his deal. I think he's somebody that for sure would be on the move in exchange for maybe a draft pick. Ryan Lindgren, who, this guy has played his heart out for years with the Rangers, but he's having a tough time this season. I think the injuries have really caught up to him and had a little bit of a shaky game today, even though the Rangers won. I think you'd see him get dealt. He's in the last year of his deal. Jimmy Vesey finally got back into the lineup today. Not that you get a king's ransom for Vesey, but he'll be a UFA after the season too. So I think, if the Rangers fall out of it, you'll see them move those guys and replace them with some of the guys in the AHL, whether that's Brandon Othman, former first-round pick, Brett Berard, who was up earlier this season. It all depends on how they do between now and then. So going to be very, very interesting to see the Rangers, their fate is in their own hands, I think is the best way to put it.
JT Miller, obviously, there were some issues with him in the locker room in Vancouver. There have been some issues in the locker room for the Rangers this year as far as team chemistry, who doesn't like who, more toward management maybe than teammates. But does adding JT Miller put more volatility into this team, or do you think he'll fit right in? He's been here before.
Yeah, I mean, that is certainly a possibility. Like I said, there's a wide range of outcomes when it comes to JT Miller and how this ultimately plays out, during his second tenure with the Rangers here. But this team needed a shock to the system. They needed a jolt in the worst kind of way. Things have just been kind of stale this season, and effort has been lacking from some very important players on this team pretty much, off and on throughout the entire season. So, JT Miller, things went bad in Vancouver. With the last handful of games with the Canucks notwithstanding, I don't think you're going to look at JT Miller and think like, oh, the effort's not there, the intensity's not there, the fire's not there. If nothing else, he's going to give you that in spades every single night. Now, could that clash with some of the personalities in the Ranger locker room? That's at least possible. But at this point, the way things have gone this year, it's a risk I'm willing to take. And like I said, it comes back to the retooling concept that I talked about earlier. I think some of these guys that maybe he might clash with might be gone by next season anyway. It's at least possible. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But again, it's all about risk versus reward. And for me, there's enough of a reward here getting JT Miller at a discount that I'm willing, at least for one. They didn't ask me, but I would be willing to take that risk if I'm the Rangers going forward for the next, however many years that Miller ends up being here.
All right, John, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, wherever you're listening to this, watching this, you can find Locked On New York Rangers there as well. We're on YouTube, and you can find me at jchick17 on Twitter, at jchik17. Give us a follow, come talk some hockey, and we'll see how it shakes out this year for the Rangers.
All right, thanks, John.
All right, thank you.